There are moments in war when the universe seems to pause, as if holding its breath before deciding whether to collapse or be reborn. Amuro Ray had lived through many such moments, fleeting instants suspended between despair and hope, grief and revelation. But nothing in the long, blood-soaked history of the universal century had prepared him for the silence that now surrounded him. Silence unlike any battlefield he had ever known. Silence that was not born from peace, but from the complete absence of meaning itself. The final push at Axis had been meant to save humanity, one desperate act in a long chain of desperate acts. He remembered the glow first. That otherworldly brilliance as the Nu Gundam psychoframe resonated with the collective will of every soul who still believed in tomorrow. It had felt like touching the heart of creation, a moment where life ignored all boundaries and fought to exist simply because it must. He remembered the warmth flooding through him, the unbearable pressure, the sensation that something vast and ancient had placed its hand gently, almost reverently, upon his spirit. And then fracture. The light twisted, not outward, into salvation, but inward, collapsing into a singularity of psychic resonance so intense it shredded the familiar shape of space around him. Amuro did not scream, because screaming required breath, and breath required a world that still obeyed the rules of existence. He fell, or rose, or drifted. Motion became meaningless when the stars themselves bent like heated metal, shapes blurred, memories thinned. The boundaries of his own identity flickered as if someone were redrawing the lines of his mind with trembling hands. Somewhere inside that silent storm, he felt the Nu Gundam being stretched thin along invisible threads, its armor groaning like a living thing resisting dissolution. The psychoframe pulsed, alive with the thoughts of countless souls, comforting and terrifying at once. It tried to shield him, it tried to reach something, or someone. He wasn't sure. At the edge of consciousness, he sensed voices. Not Xeon, not Federation, not even human perhaps. Just echoes, some grieving, some furious, some pleading, as though the universe had forgotten to separate the living from the dead. For a moment he thought he saw Lala, her presence soft and luminous, but the vision dissolved like mist. When the storm ended, it did so not gradually, but with the abruptness of a blade severing a thread. Amuro gasped. Sound returned first. The hum of life support systems, faint static from damaged sensors, the rhythmic pulse of the psychoframe still striving to interpret reality. Then came light cold, distant stars visible through the panoramic cockpit glass, but they were wrong. Arranged in patterns no astronomer from the universal century would recognize. Younger, somehow. Brighter. Hung in a void that felt deeper than the empty spaces he knew. Amuro blinked, his heartbeat slow and heavy like a drum submerged in water. Where am I? The cockpit answered with a soft flickering of damaged subsystems. The navigation computer struggled to harmonize with the psychoframe, throwing incoherent data across the HUD. Star charts scrambled. Spatial coordinates refused to align with anything in its database. Amuro steadied his breathing, forcing his racing mind to slow. Clarity was something a Newtype must draw out of chaos. The Nu Gundam floated quietly, its luminous green psychoframe dim but stable. The machine looked wounded, as though the journey across the dimensional boundary had stripped away layers of its very soul. Amuro reached out with his thoughts, letting the machine's consciousness brush against his. It felt afraid. Machines shouldn't feel fear. But psychoframe technology had always blurred lines between will and mechanism. Today, those lines were nearly non-existent. Easy, he whispered. I'm here. But he did not know where here was. He tested the thrusters. Response was sluggish but functional. Slowly, methodically, he rotated the massive mobile suit until his sensors faced the nearest cluster of stars. The emptiness felt different. The vacuum carried a faint pressure, an invisible presence, as if something immense observed him from afar. A cold shiver crawled up Amuro's spine. I'm not alone. The realization emerged not from fear, but from instinct, Newtype instinct, that peculiar sharpening of awareness that revealed what normal minds could never sense. A ripple passed through his consciousness. A disturbance, subtle yet vast, like a hand brushing against the waters of reality. It reminded him of the moment before a powerful enemy locked onto him in battle, except this presence was infinitely older, broader, patient. He reached out with his mind, a feeble attempt, like a whisper cast into a thunderstorm. Nothing answered. Not directly. But the void trembled. Amuro gritted his teeth as another memory surged axis, the radiant light, the metaphysical explosion that had folded space like paper. Had he been hurled into another sector of the galaxy? Another time? Another dimension? The answer was irrelevant for now. Survival demanded pragmatism. He recalibrated long-range scanners. Static washed across the display, then gave way slowly to shapes. Distant energy signatures. At first faint, then sharpening as the sensors adjusted to this new universe. Amuro's breath caught as he leaned closer. Starships. Not Musai. Not White Base. Not any design belonging to the Federation or Zeon. These vessels were angular, dagger-shaped, arranged in tight formations like blades poised to strike. Their power signatures were strong, stronger than any warship humanity had crafted in the universal century. Their silhouettes alone radiated authority and cruelty. Who are you? He pushed the Nu Gundam's sensors further. No response came from the vessels. They maintained formation with perfect discipline, unaware or uninterested in the lone machine drifting in the void. But Amuro felt something else. Something emanating from that fleet, like a storm front of emotion and intent fear, dominance, hunger, destiny tangled with defiance. This was not humanity's brand of war. This was something older, ritualistic, bound by beliefs and powers the universal century had long discarded or forgotten. Then it struck him a sudden, violent pulse of awareness, as if a mind from across the cosmos had turned directly toward his own. Amuro's eyes widened. The sensation was sharp, invasive, ancient. The Force. He did not know the name, but he knew the nature, an energy field reaching for him, probing him, curious and cautious, like a predator sniffing unfamiliar prey. For the first time since awakening, fear touched Amuro's heart. Someone can see me. The Nu Gundam trembled, psychoframe shimmering faintly as though resisting the intrusion. Amuro steadied himself, pushing back with the strength of a Newtype's mind. The probing presence hesitated, surprised, perhaps that a lone pilot encased in metal dared to resist. Far away, on one of those dagger-shaped ships, a robed figure inhaled sharply. A ripple went through the cosmic field binding this universe together. Here, in this galaxy, his arrival had not gone unnoticed, and the silence of the void was no longer silent. For a while, Amuro simply watched the distant fleet, letting the Nu Gundam drift in the dark like a lone fragment of a shattered world. It was an old habit: observe before you move, listen before you speak. In war, the first thing to die is the luxury of certainty. Here, in a sky that did not belong to his history, certainty had never existed at all. He began with the basics. The long-range scanner struggled at first to interpret the new forms of radiation saturating this region, but little by little, patterns emerged. The dagger-shaped vessels were colossal, their hulls sheathed in overlapping energy fields unlike the I-field barriers or Minovsky interference he knew. Their engines burned with a pale, predatory glow, and their weapon signatures were as cold and precise as guillotine blades. These were not exploration ships, they were instruments of control. Military, Amuro murmured, and organized. He cross-checked relative distances. His position was far enough to avoid immediate detection, but close enough that if they chose to, those ships could close the gap with terrifying speed. He might outrun a single warship with the Nu Gundam's agility, but not an entire armada. Here, boldness was suicide. He needed information more than he needed glory. He adjusted the sensors, widening the scan net. That was when he saw them. Scattered like metallic gnats around the larger ships, smaller craft danced in tight formations. Their silhouettes were compact, twin-winged, and equally menacing. Their movement patterns revealed terrifying discipline. They moved, as if guided by a single, invisible hand. No wasted motion, no improvisation, only obedience. Mobile suits? He wondered. The data said otherwise. Their mass was wrong. Their profiles resembled starfighters, not humanoid machines. They weren't built for the kind of close quarters, three-dimensional infantry ballet that Zeon and the Federation had refined over decades of conflict. These were blades meant to be thrown, not wielded. He inhaled slowly. So this universe favors a different kind of war. His thoughts wandered to those he had left behind, Bright, Shah, the faceless millions on Earth and in space who would never know what had happened to the man who vanished in a storm of light at Axis. Had his sacrifice meant anything back there? Had the world been saved, or had the universe simply chosen another direction for its dying breath? The Nu Gundam's psychoframe pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat trying to reassure him. Amuro let his mind sink into the luminous lattice of thought-reactive metal, feeling its resonance with his own unease. Something was listening in the dark, not just the fleet, not just machines. Something deeper. His HUD flickered just a small disturbance, easily dismissed as system noise, but Amuro had survived too many ambushes to ignore the prickling at the back of his consciousness. He tightened his grip on the controls. "Someone's searching," he whispered. Not visually, not with conventional scanners. This felt like a hand sweeping through the currents of reality itself, grazing the edges of his presence, testing the contours of his existence. Earlier, it had been a distant rumble, a storm beyond the horizon. Now, it was closer, focused. He weighed his options. If he powered down completely, he might fade into the background, hiding like space debris. But if that unseen presence was truly psychic in nature, a field that saturated all things, then simply going dark would not erase the imprint of his consciousness. A Newtype mind burned like a beacon once awakened, and with the psychoframe amplifying him, Amuro might as well have been a star screaming into eternity. He chose a middle path. Minimal thrusters, reduced emissions, sensors on passive listening mode. The Nu Gundam slipped back, drifting further from the main vector of the fleet's trajectory, like a ghost refusing to decide if it wanted to haunt the living or the dead. That was when space bent again. Not the violent, reality-shredding distortion that had hurled him across worlds. This was something more disciplined, more deliberate. A sharp, sudden bloom of energy not far from the fleet, like a wound torn open in the fabric of space and then carefully sutured shut. His instruments shrieked with warnings, unable to categorize the event. Before Amuro's eyes, lines of starlight twisted, then resolved into a slender vessel dropping from nothingness into existence. Smaller than the capital ships, sleeker, with a predatory elegance that spoke of speed and surgical precision. Its hull was sharp and purposeful, designed for insertion rather than occupation. His breath slowed. This is how they travel? The data screamed one conclusion. This galaxy had mastered a method of faster-than-light transit, utterly unlike Minovsky drive theory. Not folding space with brute force engines, not crawling through relativistic cruelty, but piercing it, as a blade passes through flesh. Hyperspace, if he had to name it. The new vessel joined the formation. A shift rolled through the energy field Amuro could not see but could distinctly feel, like a congregation holding its breath as a high priest entered the temple. Even without understanding their language or signals, he knew someone important had arrived. The probing presence in the void sharpened. It no longer brushed his mind, it gripped it. Amuro stiffened in the cockpit as a sudden weight plunged into his awareness. It was not like connecting with another Newtype, not the familiar ache of souls laid bare, not the sad intimacy of shared trauma and hope. This was colder, more invasive. It held the same architecture as those moments, yes, two minds entangled through something greater than themselves, but where Newtype resonance sought understanding, this force sought ownership. Words did not pass between them. Concepts did. Who are you? The question was not spoken, yet it echoed in the hollows of his thoughts. A will, vast and disciplined, peered through him as a hunter might appraise an unknown animal. Amuro's instinct screamed at him to recoil, to cut the link, but he held his ground. Running would only mark him as prey. Newtypes knew. Fear was another battlefield, one that determined victory long before the first shot. He answered not with words, but with a steady assertion of self, a sense of I am, Amuro Ray, pilot, survivor, witness to too many endings that claimed to be beginnings. The presence hesitated. For the briefest instant, Amuro glimpsed something behind it, a great, roiling sea of lives and possibilities, stretching across this galaxy like veins of light and shadow woven through every atom. This field did not merely sense him, it flowed around him, through him, as if tasting the unfamiliar alloy of his soul. It was like the psychoframe, and yet utterly different. Where psychoframe gathered and reflected will, this field generated it, binding all things together in a single, indifferent embrace. The link snapped. Amuro gasped, clutching his chest as if he'd surfaced from deep water. The HUD blurred, then refocused. The fleets continued their stately march through the void, unaware of the metaphysical contest that had just taken place. Or perhaps very aware. On the newly arrived ship, a figure in dark robes opened his eyes. Amuro couldn't see him, but he felt the decision, cold and precise, crystallized somewhere in that distant vessel. The ghost in this sector of space was no longer a mystery, it was a target. Alarms flared. Multiple small signatures detached from the larger ships, arrowing outward in disciplined waves. The compact, winged craft he had noted earlier now surged ahead, engines screaming against the silence of the void. Their vector was changing. Towards him. "So that's it," Amuro whispered. "You found me." He considered retreat. The Nu Gundam was faster, more agile than these starfighters, at least on paper. But fleeing would draw attention. And if that robed presence could sense his mind from across the void, sheer distance might be meaningless. The only way to learn the rules of this new arena was to step into it. He straightened in the pilot's chair. The familiar calm settled over him, the grim serenity of one who has already died 1,000 times in simulations and battles and understands that fear is only useful until the shooting starts. "All right," he murmured. "Let's see what kind of war you fight in this galaxy." He flicked the controls. The Nu Gundam awoke. Psychoframe panels glowed with a subdued green radiance, its luminous skeleton breathing like some celestial beast preparing to roar. Thrusters fired in a controlled burst, angling the mobile suit away from its passive drift and into a deliberate, calculated course. Not directly toward the incoming fighters, but not away from them either, just enough to show that this unknown entity was not debris, not prey, but a combatant choosing its ground. The distance collapsed. His sensors finally resolved clear images of the oncoming craft, sleek, twin-ion-driven machines, designed for rapid interception, their cockpits housing pilots who had never seen a mobile suit, never imagined combat in human shape. Their formation tightened, targeting systems locking onto the lone anomaly in their path. Amuro felt them, faint sparks of life and training. Not Newtypes. Just soldiers. Just people. "I've killed too many like you already," he murmured. Laser locks flickered across his screen, and somewhere beyond them, across the silent spaces between ships and stars, the unseen will that had touched his mind watched closely, waiting to see what manner of thing had intruded upon its domain. The first volley of emerald bolts lanced out toward him, tracing straight lines of engineered death through the void. Amuro's hands moved. The war of this galaxy had come to him, and whether he wished it or not, his arrival would be written in the language he knew best. Light, steel, and the silence that follows. The first wave of green laser fire swept past the Nu Gundam like a storm of angry ghosts. Amuro twisted the machine's frame with a precision that was almost reflexive, letting the shots carve bright scars across the darkness behind him. He felt every motion as if it were his own flesh turning, bending, evading. The mobile suit responded not as a tool, but as an extension of his will, a living idea forged in metal and light. The TIE fighters screamed past him, engines wailing like mechanical banshees. Their pilots reformed quickly, looping around in a disciplined arc that spoke of ruthless training and absolute obedience. They were not new types. They were not warriors who sensed each other through space and intent. They were soldiers in a machine that demanded conformity. Amuro felt almost sorry for them. He fired a single, deliberate shot. The beam rifle's golden lance pierced the void, and a TIE fighter evaporated in a flash of dissolving metal and ruptured energy cells. No body, no scream, just a brief eruption of light swallowed instantly by the darkness. The others hesitated, not because they feared death. Fear was a luxury soldiers rarely allowed themselves, but because Amuro had done something impossible in their doctrine. A lone humanoid machine, operating without hyperspace or repulsor lift technology, had killed one of them with the calm, surgical precision of a veteran swatting a fly. Then something else happened. He felt them. Not their minds, not exactly, but their sudden, collective spike of confusion washed over him like a faint vibration in the fabric of space. It wasn't Newtype resonance. It wasn't the gentle bell tone of shared souls reaching toward understanding. It was something more primal, a ripple in an invisible ocean he had not known existed until today. The Force. Though he didn't know the word yet, he recognized the sensation. This was the same pressure that had brushed against his mind earlier, the same vast sea that had tasted his consciousness. It surged again, now stronger, now deliberate, as if the death of the TIE pilot had drawn its attention more sharply. In that instant, Amuro felt a presence descend upon him like the shadow of a colossal predator. It did not approach in the physical sense. It approached through the unseen field that permeated this galaxy. A will far greater, far darker, dipped into the currents that defined existence and reached toward the Nu Gundam's luminous core. Amuro tensed. The psychoframe ignited. A soft green shimmer pulsed from the machine's chest and spine, illuminating the cockpit with a ghostly radiance. The metal lattice hummed with emotional resonance, his fear, his focus, his determination magnified and reflected back at him. The sensation was both empowering and unsettling. In the universal century, the psychoframe had almost become divine in the hands of those who dared to touch its potential. Here, it met something equally mythic, equally ancient. Two systems of cosmic awareness brushed against each other like twin storms seeking to understand the other's shape. The TIE fighters attacked again, firing in synchronized bursts that traced patterns of light across the void. Amuro dodged without thinking. His mind was elsewhere, half in battle, half locked in a silent struggle with the invisible entity studying him. He felt it more clearly now. A mind, a will, a watcher. And with frightening certainty, he knew that it did not merely observe the battle. It evaluated him, prying into every movement, every flicker of thought, as if dissecting the nature of this strange warrior who had appeared from nowhere. "Who are you?" Amuro asked aloud, though no one would hear. The answer came not in words, but in a cold wave of inquiry. The presence did not speak language, it spoke intent. It asked, "What are you?" Amuro gritted his teeth and pushed back, not violently, but firmly. He projected his identity as a Newtype, a human evolved to sense and communicate beyond the limits of flesh. He showed his memory brief flashes of war, of Zeon, of the blood-soaked halls of history written in the universal century. The presence recoiled, not in fear, but in surprise. It had never encountered a mind tuned through trauma and hope in the precise frequency of a Newtype. It recognized the power, but not the origin. It recognized the emotion, but not the mechanism. For a moment, Amuro sensed the other's curiosity sharpen like a blade held against his cheek. Then the pressure vanished. Abruptly, completely, as if withdrawn by someone who had just discovered that fire burns. The TIE fighters circled for a third attack run. But this time, Amuro moved differently, not just with skill, he'd always had that, but with understanding. He was no longer alone. He was connected to something vast, and whether he wanted it or not, that connection tugged at him. He swept the beam saber from its mount, igniting a pillar of burning plasma. The weapon roared to life like a sun trapped in a blade. The TIE pilots faltered at the sight. Perhaps they had seen lightsabers before, but never one held by a giant, never one wielded with the grace of a warrior born to defy gravity. Amuro dashed forward. The first TIE fighter cleaved in half, its cockpit splitting open like a brittle fruit. The second tried to flank him, but the psychoframe pulsed again, whispering subtle suggestions to his intuition. He moved before the threat fully formed, slicing through the attacker in a single sweeping arc. Flashes of disintegrating metal illuminated the void like falling stars. As the last TIE fighter spiraled away, engines failing, Amuro sensed something else approaching, not from the fleet, not from the fighters, from within the invisible sea. A ripple of light, a shadow, a memory of something that had never existed in his world? He didn't know. But he sensed an approach not by thrusters or engines, but by presence alone. A ship emerged at the far edge of his senses, sleek, angular, faster than any vessel had a right to be. Its course was direct, purposeful. Someone aboard it radiated a pressure so overwhelming it felt like a gravitational pull on the soul. A Jedi, or a Sith. Though he knew neither word, he felt both possibilities. The Nu Gundam's psychoframe quivered, resonating with the encroaching presence like a tuning fork struck by an unseen hand. Someone stronger, Amuro whispered. Much stronger. He could not hide. And he could not flee. Because this new arrival did not track him by engine heat or radiation trail. It tracked him by awareness. By the blazing, defiant flame of his Newtype mind, shining like a star in a galaxy where the Force bound all things. Amuro closed his eyes briefly. He felt Lala for the smallest moment. He felt the thousands of souls who had once brushed against him in the depths of battle. He felt the psychoframe's memory of Axis glowing with a love and grief too immense to bear. Then he opened his eyes. The ship closed the distance. A presence reached for him again, but this time not to invade, not to hunt, to meet him. Two paths of evolution, two philosophies of power, two ways of touching the infinite, Newtype and Force, colliding for the first time in history. Amuro gripped the controls. He would not bow. He would not flee. He would not let another universe dictate his fate. "Come," he whispered, and the galaxy answered. The ship that approached him was not enormous, but it carried a gravity of presence that pressed upon the soul like a descending blade. It was shaped like a predatory arrowhead, sleek and disciplined in its design, its metal skin absorbing the starlight as if it had no intention of ever giving any of it back. Amuro watched it draw near, tracing the wake of its momentum through vacuum, yet feeling something much deeper ripples in the unseen ocean he had begun to sense after his arrival. Inside that ship was the consciousness that had touched him earlier. The mind, like a cold moon. The will that probed his identity with the curiosity of a scholar and the hunger of a warlord. Whoever they were, their approach was deliberate, patient, certain. Amuro steadied the Nu Gundam, angling its luminous frame with the quiet dignity of a warrior who had long accepted the weight of impossible odds. He was used to being a symbol, sometimes of hope, sometimes of fear, sometimes merely a reminder that humanity's evolution marched forward whether it wanted to or not. But here, in this galaxy, he was something else entirely. He was an anomaly. And anomalies were hunted. The angular ship halted its advance a few kilometers away, slowing with a grace that spoke of mastery over its own momentum. Amuro expected weapons locking onto him, targeting systems calculating his destruction. But instead, an icy silence fell over the void, heavy and expectant. Then he felt it. A gaze. Not through cameras or scopes. Through the Force, the unseen medium that wound through this galaxy like the blood of a god. The presence reached toward him again, but this time its touch was more controlled. Less probing, more focused. It slid into the edges of his awareness with a precision that spoke of immense discipline. He sensed authority. Authority so absolute it could reshape entire civilizations with a single command. A mind sharpened by years of study and cruelty. A will accustomed to obedience, to the bending of smaller souls beneath its grasp. And beneath that iron exterior, a faint tremor of excitement. Whoever was aboard that ship had never encountered someone like Amuro Ray. The sensation withdrew slowly, leaving behind a whisper of conclusions forming in the darkness. Amuro felt the judgment hang in the void like a sentence waiting for a signature. The figure had decided something dangerous. Then the ship transmitted a signal. Not a demand. Not a threat. An invitation. A narrow beam of red light drew a circle in the void, a targeting lock, but not to fire. A request to open communications. The Nu Gundam's systems flickered. An audio channel forced itself open, and though the voice was calm, it carried the weight of someone who expected galaxies to kneel. Unknown pilot, it intoned, deep and resonant. You have entered imperial space. Power down your machine. Amuro exhaled slowly. He had heard commanding voices before Dozal Zabi's brute thunder, Char's quiet arrogance, the bureaucratic bark of Federation officers. But this was something else. This voice did not request submission. It assumed it. He did not answer. Silence stretched. Only the hum of the psychoframe filled the cockpit. Your vessel is unlike any we have catalogued, the voice continued, its tone smooth as polished obsidian. Its energy signature defies classification, and your presence in the Force is unique. Force. The word rang inside Amuro's mind, cold as the steel of a guillotine. So that was the name for this field that saturated everything. He had felt it press against him, observing him, judging him. Now it seemed it wished to claim him. Another voice broke through the channel, harsher, eager, predatory. My lord, shall we bring him in for interrogation? The first voice did not answer immediately. The silence was more chilling than any threat. Amuro tightened his grip. The psychoframe pulsed faintly, responding to the tension that coiled inside him like a spring made of memory and resolve. Then the verdict came. No, the first voice said. This one is not to be destroyed recklessly. Not until we understand what he is. A cold dread curled in Amuro's stomach. They wanted him alive, but not because they saw him as a person, because they saw him as a tool. The Empire, whatever its full shape, was beginning to reveal its intentions. And like Xeon before it, it hungered for power, for control, and for anything that could tilt the balance of the galaxy in its favor. The voice continued, lower now, almost curious. Pilot, your mind resists the Force. That alone makes you an invaluable anomaly. So they were aware of him, truly aware, not just of his machine, but his mind, his evolution, his Newtype nature. He felt the psychoframe pulse, reacting to the pressure of the Force directed at him. It wasn't hostile, not yet, but it was strong enough to bend the thoughts of weaker men like reeds in a storm. Amuro resisted, meeting it with the defiant stillness of a soul tempered by war. The voice shifted, softening, almost persuasive. Join us. You have already demonstrated capabilities that exceed our expectations. Your power could reshape the galaxy. Amuro almost laughed. Join them? Join another empire drenched in steel and blood? Even without understanding the hierarchy of this galaxy, he sensed its cruelty, its order enforced by fear, its discipline born not from unity but domination. I've seen what empires do, he whispered, though the channel wasn't open. I've seen how they burn the world and call it peace. He did not answer aloud. The silence was answer enough. The presence tightened. A subtle shift in the void occurred like a crack in the atmosphere of a planet right before a storm breaks. The voice on the ship changed, shedding its veneer of calm. Very well, it said, colder now. If you will not kneel, then you will be taken. The ship moved. An order pulsed through the fleet like a shockwave. Hundreds of TIE fighters and multiple larger vessels began repositioning with terrifying coordination. They were reorganizing the battlefield around him, cutting off escape vectors, sealing corridors of retreat, weaving a net of military geometry around the lone mobile suit. Amuro's screen filled with threat markers. Red. Dozens. Then hundreds. The Empire feared him now. Not because they understood what he was, but because they didn't. Fear in an empire like this was not paralysis, it was action. Brutal, overwhelming action. The angular ship surged forward, dropping into a direct interception vector. Amuro felt the growing presence within it, the pressure of that mind that had touched his. It was eager now, thirsting. A cold hand reaching through space, certain that it would seize him. The Nu Gundam vibrated. The psychoframe glowed hotter. For the first time in this galaxy, the luminous green outline of a living machine flared like a beacon of opposition. Amuro's jaw tightened. I won't be your weapon. The Empire closed in. A shadow fell across the stars. War was coming swift, merciless, inevitable. And the first blow would be struck in the silent void between two philosophies. A galaxy ruled by the Force. and a pilot forged in the fire of mankind's evolution. The Empire tightened its formation like a steel fist closing around a single, defiant spark. The dagger-shaped ships arrayed themselves into a predatory crescent, each one humming with the power of a military machine built to crush dissent, erase anomalies, and swallow entire civilizations beneath its shadow. Their discipline was terrifying, beautiful, in the way that an avalanche is beautiful when it begins to fall. There was no hesitation, no clumsy human uncertainty, just purpose. And in that tightening noose, the Nu Gundam hovered like a lone flame, refusing to be extinguished. Amuro felt the pressure building again, the subtle, invisible weight of the force settling over him. Not the cold, meticulous presence he had sensed earlier. This was something broader, softer, like an ocean wind brushing against his cheek. Another presence, another observer. The void trembled. Light blossomed on the far edge of space, not in a violent burst like the imperial hyperspace entry, but in a gentle shimmer, as if reality itself stepped aside respectfully to allow a visitor through. The ship that emerged was small, almost humble compared to the Empire's war machines. Smooth curves instead of sharp angles. Its design whispered of harmony, of balance, a stark contrast to the Empire's brutalist architecture. Amuro sensed calm emanating from it. A mind. Warm, steady, watching with compassion instead of hunger. Another one, he murmured. This galaxy had more than one kind of warrior. The new ship's presence rippled through the force, sending a subtle tremor through the Empire's encirclement. Their formation tightened instinctively, as if bracing for the arrival of an enemy they understood far too well. Jedi. Amuro didn't know the word, but he knew the feeling. This presence did not push into his mind. It asked to understand him. He closed his eyes for the briefest moment, letting the sensation wash over him. It wasn't Newtype resonance, yet it carried the same gentle yearning and expression of a mind seeking connection, not dominance. It reminded him of Lala, of the quiet, painful moments between souls that saw too deeply into each other. The communications panel crackled. A voice, calm as a still lake, entered his cockpit. Unknown pilot, you are not aligned with the Empire. Lower your weapon. I am not your enemy. Amuro opened his eyes. Enemy? Ally? Those words had lost their meaning long ago. He had seen too many banners raised in the name of justice, only to mask slaughter. Too many charismatic leaders preaching peace while sharpening their knives. He could not trust anyone by words alone, not anymore. But this voice, this presence, it did not lie. The Empire reacted instantly. Jedi vessel, the cold voice from before thundered over the channel. You will withdraw. The anomaly is under imperial jurisdiction. Jurisdiction? The Jedi replied gently. The only jurisdiction that matters here is life, and I sense no malicious intent from this pilot. The two philosophies collided instantly, like matter and antimatter. The Empire. Dominion, fear, control, power enforced through obedience. The Jedi. Harmony, balance, guidance, power tempered by compassion. Amuro understood none of their history, yet the clash was obvious. Two forces competing for the soul of a galaxy, two religions of power, each certain of its righteousness. He almost laughed. It was no different from the universal century Zeon preaching the liberation of spaceanoids while raining death on Earth. The Federation claiming to protect humanity while smothering it with corruption and bureaucracy. Each side believing its philosophy inevitable, eternal. Now, here he was again caught between ideologies shaped by centuries of blood. Amuro activated external communication. His voice was steady, but it carried the weary resonance of someone who had lived enough lifetimes in the cockpit of a war machine. I don't belong to either of you. The Empire answered first. No matter, the cold voice declared. You will serve the Empire one way or another. The Jedi responded second. You do not need to serve anyone, but peace cannot be found in violence. Amuro's hands tightened on the controls. Peace, war, obedience, harmony. Empty words when spoken by strangers. I've heard these speeches, he said quietly, though the microphone carried every syllable into the void. From Zeon, from the Federation, from men who wanted to rule and from men who pretended not to. Silence fell across the channel. He continued, "You talk about peace, but I've seen how quickly peace burns when someone wants power. You talk about order, but I've seen how order crushes the innocent." The presence inside the Jedi ship stirred sorrow, recognition. The presence aboard the Imperial ship tightened annoyance, calculation. Amuro inhaled slowly. "If you want to understand me, then understand this: I fight to survive. Nothing more." The psychoframe pulsed, responding to the sincerity of his words. Its green glow brightened subtly, like the heartbeat of a creature remembering what it meant to live. The Jedi finally spoke. "You feel the Force around you, though you do not recognize it. Your mind touches it naturally, as if you were born attuned to its currents." Amuro frowned. "Force? It binds all living things," the Jedi answered gently. "It speaks in the quiet places of the soul. It sings in the space between moments. You touch it without effort." He hesitated, as if you were meant to. Meant to? A destiny written in a universe he did not belong to. Amuro shook the thought away. "I'm not part of your galaxy. I'm a Newtype. That's all." The Jedi fell silent at the unfamiliar word, but Amuro sensed curiosity and respect radiating through the Force like warm sunlight. The Empire spoke next. "A waste," the cold voice hissed. "Your abilities are wasted on your defiance. You could be transformed, refined, elevated." Amuro recognized the tone instantly. It was the same tone he had heard from monstrous officers in Zeon who wished to turn new types into weapons. The same tone from the Federation scientists who wished to dissect them. The same tone from every power that ever sought to harness evolution instead of understanding it. A quiet, deep disgust rose in him. He answered the Empire with a simple truth. "Humanity grows through pain," he whispered, "but only tyrants believe they have the right to shape that pain." The presence in the Imperial ship flared anger, then hunger, then a cold and terrifying resolve. "Then you have made your choice." The Jedi's voice sharpened. "No, he has not chosen the Empire, and he will not. You presume to protect him? I presume to protect life. Then you will die with him." The void shattered into motion. TIE fighters surged. The Jedi ship accelerated. The Empire's formation contracted into a killing cage. The Force rippled violently as wills collided. And Amuro Ray, pilot of the Nu Gundam, felt the psychoframe blaze with emerald fire. Two philosophies crashed around him. Two ancient orders fought to claim the fate of a galaxy. But Amuro bowed to neither. "Enough," he whispered. He raised the Nu Gundam's beam rifle. If this galaxy demanded a demonstration of who he was, he would show them. The first shot fired by the Empire did not come from a TIE fighter, nor from one of the sleek escort frigates. It came from the flagship, the angular vessel whose presence Amuro had felt long before he ever saw its silhouette. A spear of crimson energy tore across the void, roaring past the Nu Gundam's shoulder and dissolving into a distant spray of molten particles. It was not meant to kill him. It was a warning shot. A claim. "You are ours." Amuro felt the intention behind it like a cold breath on the back of his neck. The Force carried meanings not spoken, only felt. And the message was clear. This was no longer a test or an investigation. This was conquest. The TIE fighters swarmed again, but this time their attack was not reckless. They moved in perfect unison, as if guided by a single mind. Their formation shifted, tightening into a pattern that reminded Amuro disturbingly of a funnel, a spiral intended to drag prey inward, no matter how fiercely it resisted. He had seen Zeon use such formations. He had broken them. He had survived them. But this felt different. He sensed the guiding hand behind the pilots. A will bending their movements. A will using them. And then it struck him like ice water down the spine. The Force, not merely watching him, directing them. The Empire wasn't just a military machine. It was a military machine wielded by a mind capable of reaching into each soldier, each pilot, each moment of movement, like a puppeteer plucking 1,000 strings at once. The Jedi ship darted forward, its presence cutting through the void like a shard of calm light. The Jedi, whoever they were, tried to divert the incoming fighters, using their own mastery of the Force to nudge trajectories, disrupt formations, lessen the killing intent. A subtle battle of wills crackled across the battlefield, invisible but palpable, like thunder that had not yet found its lightning. Amuro gritted his teeth. This was not his war, but he was in its jaws now. The Nu Gundam surged forward, thrusters flaring in bursts of white fire. He swept the beam rifle across the nearest cluster of TIE fighters, vaporizing 2 instantly. The third managed to dodge, but Amuro was already moving, the psychoframe shimmering with a heightened intensity that mirrored his velocity. His mind sharpened. Newtype awareness expanded outward, mapping the battlefield in a constellation of emotional pressure points. Fear, determination, confusion, hatred. Every living spark in a cockpit became a flicker of presence that he could sense not through the Force, but through his own evolution. Through the Newtype echo of humanity's ceaseless suffering, he sensed the Jedi too, a beacon of calm resolve, attempting to hold back an ocean with nothing but their hands. And he sensed the other presence, the one aboard the Imperial ship, looming larger and larger. It was as if the darkness within that ship grew in mass, pulling gravity toward itself, a black sun on the verge of rising. The TIE fighters spiraled inward, firing in waves. Amuro deployed the Nu Gundam's fin funnels. They blossomed like metallic wings, separating into a constellation of autonomous weapons. Their psychoframe cores pulsed, linking directly with his thoughts. Amuro inhaled. The funnels moved. With him, as him, beams lanced out in luminous arcs, tracing burning patterns across the void. Fighter after fighter disintegrated, but for every TIE that vanished, another slid seamlessly into the gap. The Empire didn't break formation, they adapted. One pilot, calmer than the others, infused with the dark presence, lunged at Amuro with frightening precision, firing at the exact angle that forced him into a defensive role. Amuro sensed the hand behind the pilot, pushing them, strengthening them, possessing them. Dark side. He felt the pressure again, a psychic blow, sudden and overwhelming, slamming into his mind like a tidal wave. His vision blurred, the cockpit dimmed, the psychoframe flared wildly, absorbing some of the force of the attack but trembling under the strain. The voice, cold, sharp, dripping with contempt, echoed inside his skull. Kneel. Amuro froze. The Force was no longer trying to understand him. It was attempting to dominate him. His thoughts choked. His will trembled, because this was no ordinary mental assault. It was the crushing weight of a Sith Lord's command, an authority carved from decades of cruelty, discipline, and hatred. The Nu Gundam shuddered, drifting as Amuro's grip slackened. Kneel. It is your nature. You were made to serve. A memory surged, bright, terrible, real. Lala. Her final smile. Her final words. The psychic scream that shattered his innocence forever. Amuro gasped. No. The voice tightened, squeezing like a vice. Yes, you bend. All beings bend. Those who do not break. The darkness grew teeth. It bit deep into his memories, dredging up buried guilt, every civilian caught in crossfire, every soldier he killed, every friend he failed to save. The Sith's presence wrapped those memories around him like chains dripping with poison. Amuro thrashed mentally, trying to cut through the suffocating web. But darkness knows the shape of pain. It knows how to whisper, how to twist the knife, how to unmake a man by dredging up the parts of himself he hoped the universe would forget. Amuro felt himself slipping. The cockpit seemed to shrink around him. The stars outside dimmed. The pressure grew unbearable, crushing him from the inside. His heartbeat stuttered. Stop, he whispered. He felt the Sith smile. You will make a fine weapon. The darkness surged. And then, the psychoframe exploded with light. A burst of emerald radiance flooded the cockpit, refracting through every panel of crystalline metal. The luminance was so sudden, so violent, that even the Sith momentarily recoiled. The Newtype light. Not the Force, not the dark side. A different evolution, a different destiny. The Nu Gundam roared as its psychoframe resonated with every ounce of Amuro's will, memories, grief, and defiance. Funnels flared with radiant fire, sweeping outward in a blossom of luminous fury. The mental chains fractured. Amuro drew in a long, shuddering breath. "Don't ever touch my mind again." His voice was no longer soft. It was steel. He surged forward, slicing through 3 TIE fighters in a single sweeping arc of his beam saber. The Jedi's presence steadied, emboldened by Amuro's resurgence. Together, not allied, but aligned in survival, they pushed against the encroaching darkness. The Sith's voice returned, but weaker, less certain, impossible. Amuro felt the Sith's shock like a tremor in the Force. "You are not of this galaxy. Your mind, your light, they do not obey our laws." Amuro raised the Nu Gundam's beam saber. Then he spoke the truth that burned in his heart. "I'm not yours to command." The funnel system activated fully. A blinding storm of emerald beams erupted across the void. The Empire faltered. The Jedi watched. And the Sith, for the first time in years, felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The void after battle is never silent. Not truly. Even when the last beam fades and the final engines flicker out, the echoes linger, ghosts clinging to the edges of consciousness, whispering the names of those who fell, those who survived, and those who should have died. Amuro Ray drifted in that haunted quiet now, the Nu Gundam's psychoframe glowing with the dim afterburn of its unleashed fury. The battlefield around him had thinned. Most of the TIE fighters lay in molten fragments scattered across kilometers of vacuum. The remaining Imperial vessels had withdrawn into a tight defensive posture, like a wounded animal licking its wounds but refusing to stop staring at the predator it had underestimated. The Sith's presence, once suffocating, now clung to the edges of space with something dangerously close to fear. And the Jedi ship hovered at a respectful distance, its luminous aura a small but steady flame watching, wondering, weighing. Amuro's breathing steadied at last. The psychic pain ebbed, the darkness receded. And yet, despite everything he had endured, despite the mind-shattering pressure and the crushing will of the Sith, he felt no relief. Only a question. "Why am I here?" His whisper floated into the cockpit, swallowed by the hum of the psychoframe. The Nu Gundam answered with a soft pulse green light shimmering like a heartbeat syncing with his own. It did not speak, but it didn't need to. He felt its reassurance, its companionship, its quiet understanding. The machine had become more than steel and circuitry. It was a vessel for his soul, an echo of humanity's grief and hope woven into metal. Then the Jedi's presence approached, not physically, but through the Force. Gentle, warm. A cautious hand extended toward a wounded stranger. "You are in pain." Amuro closed his eyes. "It's not pain," he murmured. "It's choice." The Jedi responded softly, their thoughts flowing into his mind like a breeze across still water. "Choice is the path of the living. Those who have none are already dead." He exhaled. A simple truth, delivered with sincerity he could not deny. The Jedi continued, their presence unwavering. "I sense your origin is not of this galaxy. Your mind carries echoes of a history I do not recognize, wars fought under different stars, grief born from different wounds. You do not belong to the Empire's chains, nor do you belong to our order." The words struck him harder than the Sith's attack ever had. "You're telling me I don't belong anywhere," Amuro whispered. "No." The Jedi's voice warmed. "I am telling you that you are free." Free. The word tasted strange. Foreign. Beautiful. Terrifying. Amuro had never been free. Not truly. He was forged in war, honed by tragedy, bound to a machine that absorbed the emotions of millions. He had carried the weight of humanity's evolution on shoulders not yet grown when he first entered a cockpit. He had watched friends die, enemies scream, civilians burn. He had fought because no one else could, because someone had to. Freedom was a luxury offered too late. But here, in a galaxy where the Force and the Newtype light brushed against each other like two ancient stars crossing for the first time. Freedom was suddenly real. "I could leave," he said quietly. "I could fly into the void until no one in this galaxy ever finds me." "You could." The Jedi acknowledged it without judgment. "The Force does not command your path. It only illuminates possibilities." "And if I return to my universe?" Amuro asked. The Jedi hesitated. "Return? I do not sense a path back for you. Not yet. The currents around you are disrupted." The moment you arrived, the Force rippled, as if a stone had been thrown into a pond. "Perhaps the way home is closed, perhaps not. So I'm trapped." "No." The Jedi's presence grew steadier, almost fatherly. "You are at a crossroads." "And the Empire?" he asked. Hatred not his own rippled across the Force. The Sith's voice slithered through the void, weaker but still venomous. "You cannot escape the Empire. No power you wield surpasses destiny. You will serve, or you will be hunted." Amuro didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence was defiance. The Sith's presence twisted, retreating like a wounded beast, slinking into the depths of its lair, its thoughts filled with calculation, vengeance, and an insatiable hunger to understand the anomaly that dared resist it. The choice pressed on Amuro, now heavy, suffocating, real. Stay and fight. Flee and disappear. Search for a way home. Choose a side. Choose none. The galaxy waited for his answer, its stars looking down like indifferent judges. Amuro finally spoke. "I don't want to be part of another war, not again." The Jedi's presence dimmed, sorrowful. "Every galaxy suffers war, Amuro Ray. Peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the choice to protect life even when conflict is inevitable." He looked out the cockpit window, eyes tracing the countless stars scattered across the infinite dark. "But if I fight," he whispered, "I become the thing I fear. A weapon, a symbol, a reason for others to believe war is necessary. Then choose to fight differently." "How?" The Jedi paused. "By remembering that your will shapes the machine you pilot, and your heart shapes the will you follow." Amuro closed his eyes. The words resonated deeply. On Axis, he had touched something transcendent, humanity rising together in a single moment of luminous hope. Here, the Force vibrated with ancient power, vast and indifferent. The psychoframe sang with echoes of lives intertwined through suffering and longing. Perhaps no universe was meant to be free of war, but maybe a single soul could decide how to fight. He opened his eyes. The choice crystallized within him, not of allegiance, not of ideology, but of identity. "I won't serve the Empire," he said, "and I won't follow the Jedi." The Jedi did not recoil. They simply nodded through the Force. "Then walk your own path. We will not stop you." Amuro exhaled slowly. "But I won't turn away from suffering. If I see injustice in this galaxy, if I see people crushed under power, then I'll act." A quiet warmth flowed from the Jedi. "Then the Force is with you even if you do not seek it." Amuro allowed himself a small, tired smile. The Nu Gundam shifted, psychoframe glowing with a gentle emerald hue waiting for his choice. He looked toward the vast frontier of unknown stars. "I'll find my place," he murmured, "somewhere out there, even if I have to carve it from the dark." The engines hummed. Funnels folded back into their housings. The mobile suit aligned itself toward the far reaches of the galaxy. A lone machine, a lone soul, a new destiny. The Empire watched. The Jedi listened. The Force trembled. As Amuro Ray guided the Nu Gundam into the endless night, his choice echoed silently across two universes. He would not be a weapon of war. He would become a guardian of possibility. A Newtype wandering a galaxy ruled by the Force. A light the dark could not predict. A shadow the light could not control. A free man, at last.